Hey y'all, I'm Farley with Writer's Edge Podcast, and I want to welcome you to this episode. Today I want to talk about the pelvis. I want to talk about the pelvis and your writing. So, the pelvis is super unique, and our sport is very unique, right? We are one of only two sports that doesn't fully use their feet for their foundation. Riding horses and bike riding are the only two sports that don't fully use their feet for their foundation. The pelvis is your connection to your horse. It is the foundation upon which you ride, and it does so many things, right? It sends information to your horse. We use our pelvis to do cueing, whether we're stopping or going faster or turning. We're always cueing our horse through our pelvis. It is also the intersection of your body. It's where your core is. It's also where your center of mass, your center of gravity and balance resides. It is a connection from your upper body to your lower body. That gets really important in riding because we have to connect both of those areas because they are also giving signals and doing very many different things throughout our time on the horse, right? So our legs are cueing, whether it's speeding up, slowing down, turning, you name it. We do a lot of cueing there. We also do cueing through our arms. Well, our pelvis and our core has to help support that. Otherwise, if it's not supporting that correctly, we're going to drag on that horse's face, right? We're going to get real heavy-handed and start miscuing. When we start miscuing, then we start jacking with training and how our performance ends up. The core is made up of your abdominals. Obviously, that's typically what everybody thinks about when I say core, right? Oh, you need strong abs, you need strong abs. You do. There's a whole lot more in that house that we got to pay attention to. Not only do we need good abdominals and obliques, you may have gotten those two muscles, but we need strong back muscles too, right? That really comes into play. My best example for where your back muscles come into play is watching a timed event, cowboy or cowgirl, a roper or a dogger leaving the box, okay? You're kind of leaned forward because you go from 0 to 30. And if you're not strong in your abdominals and in your back, you're going to come back and come forward. That's going to slow you and your horse down. You're going to drag on your horse and not get to where you need to go. Not get up in the saddle to stand up and rope, or not get in position to get off your horse to dog the steer, okay? So we need strong back muscles. We need strong abdominal muscles. We go lower in the core to the lower abdominals that get often overlooked. Like, we'll work on where the kind of that six-pack area is, but your abdominals connect on the front of your pelvis. And so we often will not work on strengthening those lower ones or those lower portion of the same muscles. We'll just work on kind of the upper ones, the kind of sexy ones. The lower abdominals are kind of your bread and butter. If you've got them strong, then your pelvic movement is going to work better. When you have to roll your hips to sit on your pockets, whether you're stopping or turning a barrel, even to getting up and accelerating out of that turn, or accelerating again with the box example, leaving the box. So it's a super key area within the core. As we get to the lower abdominals, we're going to go back to the back again and go to the glutes. Now that gets missed a lot, not only in riding, but in everyday life, especially here in America. We have a dumb butt problem sometimes, right? And I'm not talking about your smarts. I'm talking about your glutes activating. Because we sit, because we drive so much, because we're on our horses, our glutes often don't work as well as they should. They don't turn off completely, but they don't fire the way they need to. Here's the thing about the human body. The human body is always going to find the way to do things using the least amount of energy. And when your body finds that way to do that, it's going to always repeat that pattern and ingrain that in you as a movement pattern until you consciously change that. Okay? So it's a mind thing. It's a neuromuscular thing. It can be changed, but it takes a little bit of work. So the glutes are a big group of muscles. They're going to help you stand up in your saddle. They're going to help you with walking. A lot of people don't realize how much your butt muscles work when you're walking, when you're running, different things like that. Now, if you're an avid runner or a walker or hiker, you're going to know that. But if you're not, oftentimes we don't realize how much work they do, right? So it's interesting when your glutes are working properly, how much your riding changes, along with your walking and just everyday moving. This is very evident if you post at the trot, if you move up and down with the rhythm of your horse. And it doesn't matter which saddle you're in, whether you ride Western or English, but if you're in the English saddle, you're dang sure gonna notice that, and you're gonna notice that improvement in your riding quickly, because you cannot cheat a lot of riding in the English saddle that you can in the Western saddle, because the Western saddle is more stable. So we talked about the abs, the back muscles, the glutes. Let's talk about another group of muscles that work on your core, work with your pelvis to help with your riding. And that is your pelvic floor. What is your pelvic floor, Farley? Those are the muscles that connect on your pubic bone on the front of your pelvis, go underneath, that's why they're called the floor, and connect back on your tailbone. They work with your bowel and bladder functions. They work with sex. There can be a very common dysfunction in women for different reasons, along with men. And just like kind of the dumb butt syndrome we talked about earlier, they can not work properly, not fire properly, not be as strong, and can cause pain and discomfort and actual issues in that area of the body. They can also not fire correctly and leave your core not as strong as it could be and not working at the optimal level it could be. Tracking with me so far? So when you're working through those different things, it's important to fire those muscles and work on strengthening them, along with the way you strengthen your abs and your glutes and your back muscles. It is really the foundation of your core. It can be a problem in the riding population, because we can have tight groin muscles. And when you have tight groin muscles that tie in there around the pelvic floor muscles, that can cause them not to work as well and be lazy. If you are experiencing any pain or discomfort or issues with incontinence, pain with sex, different issues that way, I very much urge you to talk to a physical therapist or get a referral to a physical therapist, because you don't have to live that way. physical therapy can help. If you are training your core and you don't feel like you are optimally taking advantage of your body's muscles, then we need to do some pelvic floor work to help cue everything in and get it all going as a group and turn it all on together. The other interesting thing with the pelvic floor is it is tied into the diaphragm. So you're sitting there going, oh, Farley, you're blowing my mind here. You're talking about muscles, you're talking about different relationships here, and now you've learned me. We do a lot of learning around here. We don't always do as much teaching, but we do some learning. You've learned me about muscles I didn't even know I had, and now you're saying they're connected to my diaphragm. Well, guess what? Your diaphragm's a muscle, and it can be trained also. It is often not working optimally. Obviously, it has to work, otherwise there's a bigger issue, right? But the way you breathe ties into how your core works, ties into how your pelvic floor works. It also gets more complicated than that, right? Because our breathing translates information and emotions to our horses. When we get nervous and uptight and hold our breath, our horses get nervous. So you've had trainers or coaches or different people in your life tell you, breathe, take a deep breath. A lot of times before I run down the alley, I do a big exhale right at the mouth of the alley. Because if I exhale, I'm going to have to inhale and keep that breathing cycle going instead of holding my breath the whole time. So your pelvic floor and your diaphragm work as a piston, and they work in sync to have that pressure gradient change optimally in your abdominal cavity. People often don't think about breathing as being a part of symptoms that they're having. Whether it is your core is not as strong as it needs to be, or you have low back pain or even mid back pain, you can do different breathing patterns and not be doing it as optimally as you should. Like I said earlier, the human body is going to find the easiest route to accomplish something, right? So once it finds that, it's like, I'm golden. This is how we're gonna do this, because we are built to conserve energy for survival. Now that we are where we're at, we have to retrain and rework these things for optimal performance. So we've tied in all the 4 parts of the core, which are the pelvic floor, your abdominals, your back muscles, and your diaphragm. Getting them to work together will give you more optimal core strength. When you have more optimal core strength, you are more stable on your horse. That is helpful in many cases. If you're a horsemanship rider or pleasure horse rider, you are judged on how still you are often and how you have this nice quiet picture on your horse. If you rodeo, run barrels, rope, dog, even if you're a rough stock rider, you ride broncs or bareback or even bull riders, your core has to get movements done quickly and in sync with the animal and timed right. So it is super important to engage it correctly. It's also, like we talked about earlier, the connection between your legs and your upper body. If your core is strong and still, then you're able to use your hands and be softer in your hands. When you're softer in your hands, you're softer on your horse's face. You're also able to use your legs more optimally. If your core is strong, then you're gonna use the correct muscles, your inner thigh, your groin muscles to ride. You're also gonna be quieter with kicking or urging the horse forward or any cues that you do, no matter what event you do. It's super intriguing to me to work through the core and the pelvis, because that's your bread and butter. That is where riding happens. And it's a very intricate relationship that when it's working well, it's great. And when it's not, then we gotta go find which partners aren't working and get them back up to snuff. So I hope that helps with kind of understanding your pelvis and your core. We will talk more about the pelvis. We'll talk about the movements of the pelvis and how that's important to riding, along with other things, because that is a high topic of conversation around here at Rider's Edge. If you need help with your core, be sure and go to ridersedgetherapy.com and sign up for a consult or get on a phone call with me, and we'll see if we can help you. If you found this interesting, make sure and share it with your friends. And that is the best way you can help with the Rider's Edge mission of educating and conversating with people all across the industry. So I hope you found this helpful today. Have a fabulous day, and as always, I will see you down the road. Thank you for listening to the Rider's Edge podcast today. We appreciate your time and attention. Thank you for always helping us move forward and appreciating a good conversation. Help us keep the conversation going by checking out our social media channels, including Facebook at Rider's Edge Therapy and Wellness, Instagram at Rider's Edge Therapy, and our website, www.ridersedgetherapy.com. It is there that you can also book a consult for either you or your horse. Thanks, and we'll see you down the road.